The rays of light filtered through the branches of the trees this morning. We sat in the garden and contemplated the serenity and the beauty of our feelings, and the surroundings completely captivated us. We thought of you, we discovered you tucked away in the shadows, then rediscovered you on the smiles of the flowers as the sun penetrated through the petals, in the rhythm of the leaves falling in the garden, in the freedom of the birds flying in the clear blue sky. We're very happy to have found you. Now you will never leave us, for we will always find you in the beauty of life. You will always be there. I speak of Margaret Betty Begusch. While welcome seems a strange word to start with today when you're faced with that painful task of saying goodbye, but given that Margaret was such a warm, welcoming person, it doesn't seem right to start with anything else. My name is Delma Carpenter, and along with Simon and his colleagues from Parkside Funerals, we feel very privileged to have been asked to conduct this service for you. Just as a reminder, if you haven't done so already, now is a good time for you to turn your mobile phones onto silent. Margaret has touched the lives of many people, and none more than yourselves who are here today. Today we've come to remember Margaret, a woman who I know has been an integral part of your lives. She'll be remembered as a loving wife to Errol, a devoted mother to Dean, Chris and Maria, and a proud ma to all her 6 grandchildren and 8 great-grandchildren, and a loyal friend to many. What a wonderful life Margaret lived. She achieved in life what we all aspire to achieve, to be happy, have a life filled with love, happiness and family. This is not to say it was free from its challenges. She certainly faced those. Margaret was a delight to know. She was welcoming, friendly, outgoing, and had a wide circle of friends with whom she loved to visit for a chat. Nothing was ever too much trouble for Margaret when it came to her family or anyone else who needed help. She really was 1 in a million, and of course that's what makes her loss harder to bear. There's not enough words to soften the pain when you experience death of a loved one. So many emotions can be felt. Although it's not an easy time today to attend the funeral, Margaret's funeral, it does help bring a sense of completion as we face the reality of her passing. It gives us the opportunity to reflect and celebrate the life of the person that we have lost. I'm sure since Margaret's passing you have thought back over the relationship that you had with her and the memories that you have. Let's together cherish those moments and stories, because that's what made Margaret special to you, and I'm sure she'd want us to be laughing and telling stories. So let's now take a look at her life as told to me by her family. It was on the 26th of November 1941 Margaret Betty was welcomed into the world by her parents, Mary and Bill Hall. Margaret was the youngest sister of Jean. Margaret, was the youngest sister, had an older sister, Jean. The family lived in Chihuahua on a dairy farm. Visits to Grandpa and Grandma's house nearby were frequent and always a treat. Margaret was 7 years old when her family moved to Somerset, and this is where she went to school at Somerset State and her senior years at Burnie High School. It was life-changing for Margaret when she went to live at the nurses' home to train as a nurse at the La Trobe Hospital. After qualifying and becoming a registered nurse, she moved to the Burnie Hospital to work and study, advancing her career to become a midwife. Being dedicated and devoted to her work, Margaret accepted a position as matron at the Rosebery Hospital on the West Coast. Little did she know that taking her car to the local garage would see her life change significantly. It was at the garage that she met a young, handsome Austrian man named Errol. Errol kept finding things wrong with Margaret's car, so she'd keep coming back. And she did keep going back. The happy couple married at the St David's Anglican Church in Cooey in 1964. As newlyweds, they rented a house for a time in Somerset, and it was while they were living here that their 3 children were born, Dean, Chris and Maria. Working hard, making sacrifices and saving their money, they built a house in East Wynyard to call their home. Margaret worked as a midwife at the Spencer Hospital in Wynyard, delivering babies and meeting people at an exciting time in their life. She also delivered babies for lots of people that she knew. When Spencer Hospital was amalgamated with Burnie, the maternity ward at Wynyard closed and went on to be a geriatric hospital, and Margaret worked there for a time as well. It was a big career change when her and Errol established a restaurant and a takeaway business in Strawn. Living in a caravan at the back of the restaurant, it was long hours and hard work servicing the public, often cooking crayfish at 1 a.m. in the morning, ready for the next day. After operating the business for around 3 to 4 years, they sold and moved back to their home in East Wynyard. Margaret returned to nursing, working in aged care at Yamina Park. She enjoyed working with the elderly, but by far her favourite was midwifery, delivering babies. It was a sad time for Margaret and the family when son Chris was tragically taken from them in a motorbike accident in 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 1986. 19 The soul-destroying grief of losing a child impacted both Margaret and Errol. Time moved on and Margaret found the strength to get on with her life and do the things that she had to do, but understandably it was never quite the same. It was in 1992 when Margaret was out driving with Dean. They noticed a property at 509 Calder Road on the market. They had a look, got approval from Errol, and it wasn't long before they'd moved to their country retreat on Calder Road. Margaret loved her garden and could often be found wandering around her own little piece of paradise in her dressing gown. If you visited, a proud Margaret would want to give you a tour of the garden, showing you all her roses and other flowering plants. Since living in Calder Road, Margaret and Errol have welcomed woofers into their home from all over the world, and part of being a woofer is contributing around 20 hours of work a week for your lodgings and keep. Well, the woofers that stayed at the Begusch's home were lucky ones. They didn't have to do too much work. It was mostly all holidaying and the joy of spending time with Margaret and Errol. They were a welcoming pair. It was nothing for Errol to arrive home with hitchhikers. They'd be greeted by Margaret, given plenty to eat, and invited to set up camp in the backyard for a couple of days. When it came to cooking, the family have memories of Margaret's beautiful light sponge cakes, but the same cannot be said for her fruit cake. Maria said that last week her mum asked her did she want a fruit cake or go out for lunch for her birthday, and Maria chose the latter. Margaret was a people person. She loved visiting friends and was always wanting to help anyone or anyone who was unwell. She was a caregiver, providing support and care and assisting some with Reiki and Bowen therapy. On talking to the family, they told me that shopping was something that Margaret liked to do, not so much for clothes, but kitchen appliances and gadgets. The family told me that she didn't just have one kitchen gadget, it was 2 or 3, and it had a huge collection of vacuum cleaners. Dean, Chris and Maria had a loving, caring mother who wanted the best for them. They grew up knowing their family home had an open door where their mum and dad made everyone feel welcome, including their friends. And the branches of Margaret's tree of life grew with the arrival of grandchildren, Bianca, Joseph, Tessa, Emily, Mary and Lily, and great-grandchildren Finlay, Elliot, Spencer, Anna, Peyton, Hazel, Isabel and Eliza. They've never lived in a world that their ma was not a part of, and while she saw some more than others, it was not to say that they were far from her heart. Ma was delighted that there are 2 more greats on the way. For Errol, he's going to miss his soulmate Margaret. They did so much together, like the times they travelled home to see family in Austria, touring Europe, enjoying a gondola ride in Venice, and the fun time they had travelling by coach around Ireland, England and Scotland. Errol is going to miss getting breakfast every morning for his sweetheart. Margaret was a beautiful soul and leaves this world a better place for being here. She's left our world, but will never leave the hearts and the minds of those who loved her. I'd now like to invite Maria to come forward, and she's going to share some tributes of her mum with us.
My dad and brother Dean and myself and our partners and family would like to thank you for being here today to celebrate the life of Mum. Mum certainly wouldn't want us to sit around being morbid for too long at all, so let's think about her, cry and laugh, and then let's get on with living our best lives, knowing that you don't know which day could be your last. I'd like to tell you a story to hopefully bring a smile to your faces. I'll set the scene. As some of you may know, Mum was born with no sense of smell, and Dean was a bit of a wild child and was known to smoke a little of God's lettuce. So anyway, this particular day, Mum was about to head off to sewing class, but as she was a smoker back then and she had run out of ciggies, she knew Dean had the occasional rollie and asked if he could please roll her a ciggy to have before she goes to sewing class. Dean, being Dean, thought it would be hilarious if he secretly laced her cigarette with a little of the jolly green. So off Mum went, happily chuffing on her joint. Well, she tells us how she turned up in sewing class and was wondering why the teacher was so interesting and funny, and yet she had no motivation to sew a thing. After some time in class, trying hard not to laugh at the teacher, she realised what had happened, and obviously Dean was not growled out because he is golden child. Excuse me. Okay, this story now is not a funny one. It's kind of sad, but it helps us as a family to deal with our heartache. When Mum was nursing at Yamina Park, one of the residents was an old lady who was a bit of a chatterbox. However, she also had dementia, so she would chatter about random stuff. One day, Mum came home from work to tell us that this old lady had asked Mum who the boy standing with her was. He had long hair and a beard. Mum clearly knew the old lady was talking about Chris. And as a sign that it wasn't just a random statement, the old girl then followed it up by saying, "Isn't Herbie a funny name for a dog?" This old lady did not know our lives and certainly was not aware that we had lost Chris and now had a dog called Herbie. We know Mum is now with Chris, and we also know that they are still with us and we will be with them again one day. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. I'd like to invite Rodney Pern to come forward, and he's going to share a tribute with us. Thank you, Rodney.
Thank you. Firstly, not many people called me Rodney and get away with it. One was certainly Margaret, Maria, the Begusch family, my mum sometimes. Usually I'm in trouble when that happens. Del, what you brought up in the family are really, really nice things. It's funny because Maria said just in case she lost it, can she read my notes? But Margaret, to many of us, was a very special person to a lot of people. And it's a funny thing, life, because I was Dean's best friend when I grew up. We grew up in a neighbourhood at East Wynyard, the house that Del mentioned. It was just a beautiful neighbourhood, and we had some beautiful families around there, and had so many special moments. And just thinking about, these things come back in your head, particularly when you don't live, Wynyard's not my home town, I live in Hobart, but every time I come back there's so many special treasured memories. And we have to drive past the Begusch place, it's always the Begusch place, and there's always those memories there. And when Margaret and Errol were moving, I remember thinking, well, we're not going to see them much. But what the funny thing is, Margaret was always there. I'd visit from Hobart and Margaret would just come around the back door, pop her head in, and there she is having a cuppa. And from being Dean's best friend and having a best friend, I actually regarded Margaret and Errol as real good friends, irrespective of the age. And I think our whole family, my brother, my sister, my mum, all the partners around always regard Margaret. What's happening with Margaret, I'd say. And a part of coming back to Wynyard was actually Margaret popping in the door. And I looked at the front, I was on the mum's table today looking out at the sliding door thinking that Margaret's not going to be there, that sliding door. And I thought, for Errol, he has to have that every day of the rest of his life, that Margaret's not at his door. But we can all have that love for Errol and that beautiful relationship that they had. The absolute love. The stories, the story about Margaret and Errol meeting. It's one thing good about when you get older, rather than be friends or your mates, you're actually talking more about life. And Margaret and Errol told me that story about how they met and how I think Margaret put the car went on the train on the way down there because the roads were so rough you couldn't even drive down there, and how they met. And there's just so many stories that Margaret has and shared. Margaret was a real listener, and if she didn't actually like something, or if she didn't sort of think that you were right or something wasn't right, she'd say, "No, I don't think that's right." And she'd sort of talk. And some of the hilarious things that she said, even that she wasn't worried about embarrassing herself. You know, she was an honest person. And some of the stories that she said, like the time that she said that she took, the phone was ringing in her handbag, I think it was in Saverbuck, and she pulled out what she thought was the phone, and it was her remote control from the TV. But she'd tell you those stories. The story about, I think she called into the Seabrook Motel on the way home, and actually, I think she got the accelerator a bit wrong and hit the wall. Those sorts of stories. She wasn't afraid to share those stories. It was a bit of a laugh. There was other ones. Story about in the Begusch household on the wall, I can sort of see it now. There's some big spoons, they were wooden carved spoons, and I don't know who it was, but I remember her going outside with that spoon one day, chasing one of the neighbourhood kids. Because I was talking to Rick today about some sort of little bit of punch up that Dean, myself, and Rick had, and Margaret was on the veranda after that sort of happened, and she said to Rick, like, just go home. But she was so welcoming. If you got into trouble, you were back there the next day. You were still welcome. She was so forgiving, and that was just part of life. She shared her birthday with my dad, same birthday as my dad, and they had some attributes which were actually quite similar. The spending, the shopping, that they had to have 2 or 3 of everything. And it was like, I know Errol and my mum sometimes sort of think, those two, what are they up to now, or something like that in their spending. I mean, absolutely different things. The story about sewing and the stories about sewing and being a nurse, a sister, I can all see. I remember her coming home, because I spent a lot of time at the Begusch household, and like Ricky did in the whole neighbourhood, it was that dropping in the centre. It was like Margaret was our second mum. There's to a lot of the neighbourhood, she was our second mum, and that's a testament, like, for people like Ricky, coming here today. But I used to think she was a flying nun sometimes with this white sort of nurse sister uniform sometimes, but I think she carried her sewing machine out of her car a couple of times after night shifts, because she actually made stuff when she was at work to keep herself busy. So she sort of snuck that in at work. I'm so pleased. I visited, I don't know, might have been 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago. I was up at Errol and Margaret's, and a friend of mine whose partner was having a baby, and there was a little bit of a problem with with his partner with diabetes, and it was really nice to talk to Margaret. I just mentioned it to Margaret, and she sort of knew this stuff. You know, she hasn't been in what's it called? the nurses that have the babies, can't remember it now, but midwife for ages. But she still had that interest, and she still had that knowledge, and she still had that support, and so that was the supporting character. So, you know, today may be a gloomy day outside, and I'm really, really sad for Errol's loss and the family's loss. But like Maria said, Margaret would not want a gloomy day and a gloomy life. And, you know, let's celebrate Margaret's life. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk, about Margaret, and I'm sure everybody's got lots of stories, and I've probably shared a couple or two with Margaret, and you'll be looking at that door thinking that Margaret's going to knock on it, and just treasure those memories that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodney. Am I allowed to call you Rodney? Yes, I can call you Rodney, yes. In so many ways, photos help tell the stories of a person's life. And today we're going to see Margaret's life through the lens of a camera with a photo presentation while listening to some of her music. Photos certainly do tell so many stories. I'd like to share a poem with you. It's in your service sheet. It's a poem that the family chose for today. It's called An Angel. A gift from up above, she showered us with kindness and shared us with her love. She cherished every moment with the man who was her life, walking hand in hand together, facing life with all its strife. She loved her children dearly, each one a different way, nestled close within her heart, though now she's far away. She's gone to live above, but she's here with us today, smiling down on every one of us and telling us she's okay. Errol, Dean and Maria and their families have asked me to sincerely thank you for your presence here today, and they would love you to catch up with them after the service and invite you to join with them here at Parkside for a cuppa and refreshments. As we come to the final part of Margaret's service, let us be thankful for the intangibles that were so much part of her being. We remember her beautiful smile, her spirit of caring, kindness and generosity. When a calming, quiet presence was all that was needed, Margaret was there. When a silent glance could uplift a patient, friend or family, she was there. At those times when the unexplainable needed to be explained, she was there. When a gentle touch, a firm push or an encouraging word was there, she was there. In good times and bad, without judgment, she was there. To embrace the woes of the world willingly and offer hope, she was there. And now that it is time to move on in life's journey, she is there. I place these petals to pay tribute to Margaret's life and give thanks. I'd now like to invite the family to come forward and say their own goodbye by placing a flower on Margaret's coffin. The time has come when we must say goodbye. It is time for the committal. Please stand if you are able. In grief of Margaret's death, but gratitude for her life and for the privilege of sharing it with her, we say goodbye. With love and appreciation, we commit the body of Margaret Betty Begusch to the purifying elements and ultimately to the precious earth from which all things come and to which all things in life return. A butterfly light beside us like a sunbeam, and for a brief moment its glory and beauty belong to our world. But then it flies again, and though we wish it could have stayed, we feel lucky to have seen it. We hold Margaret's memory in our hearts. May she forever rest in peace.